Hello everybody and welcome to the second video in our series of videos on the Reformation. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know 2 facts about John Wycliffe and his life and teachings. You guys should also know 2 facts about Jan Hus and his life and teachings, and finally you should know 1 reform proposed by Wycliffe and 1 proposed by Hus. So in this video we are going to be looking at some of the people who tried to reform the church from some of the abuses that we discussed in the last video, and who ultimately would inspire some of Martin Luther and later Protestant reformers' ideas. We have met some people and movements who have rebelled against the church and its abuses before. We met the Cathar movement in our study of the Middle Ages. Again, the Cathars had crusade launched against them. They faced prosecution and massacres, with an inquisition or a religious court being set up in the 1240s that executed many Cathars. We also saw during our study of the Renaissance the attempts of Girolamo Savonarola's to set up a theocracy in Venice when the Medici family were overthrown despite the protests of the church. So today we will first be looking at a man called John Wycliffe, who lived in England from around 1320 to 1384. So Wycliffe was a Catholic theologian who worked in Oxford University. Now, a theologian is somebody who studies the nature of God, religion, and religious beliefs. Wycliffe opposed many practices of the Catholic Church which would inspire many of Martin Luther's ideas during the Reformation that we will be studying. He questioned the privileged status of the clergy and the wealth of clergy in the parishes compared to the poverty of the people in those same parishes. He questioned many pillars of the church, such as the Pope's authority, the sacraments, and the corruption of the monastic orders, as he called them. Perhaps his most successful idea was the idea that the Mass and the Bible should be available to the people in the language that they spoke. So this was known as the vernacular language. At this point, Mass was said in Latin, and the Bible was only available in Latin, so people couldn't read it for themselves. So Wycliffe's followers translated a few books of the Bible into the vernacular, and this is known as the Wycliffe Bible, whereas the followers of Wycliffe are known as the Lollards. So Wycliffe, he had support from nobles and the royal family in Britain, which stopped him from being from facing sanctions by the church for his beliefs. However, he lost some of that support after the Peasants Revolt in 1381, when one of the leaders, John Ball, had ideas similar to Wycliffe's ideas. And even though Wycliffe denounced the revolt, he was forced to resign from his position as a theologian in Oxford. He died soon afterwards, and his followers were persecuted by the Catholic Church and the nobility in England, with many being burned as heretics. Now, the writings of Wycliffe inspired another theologian who was working in the University of Prague in the early 1400s. Now, Jan Hus was a priest who lived in Prague, which is part of the Kingdom of Bohemia, which you can see here, under the rule of the Holy Roman Emperor. We will be meeting the Holy Roman Emperor again and see his power later on, but let's just say he was kind of a big deal at this time. Jan Hus agreed with many of Wycliffe's ideas, including preaching in the vernacular. One area where Hus came into big conflict with the church was over the sale of indulgences. We saw the last time that indulgences were pieces of paper that were given by the church which would absolve you of all of your sins or lessen your time in purgatory. Like we said, initially these were given to the Crusaders to entice them to go to war, but now the church was selling them and it was becoming a nice little earner for them. Who said that nowhere in the Bible did it state the Pope had the power, and even if he did have the power to sell indulgences, it was against the notion of Christian charity to charge for it. Hus began to gather a following who became known as the Hussites. The church were unhappy with Hus's sermons and excommunicated him from the church. To be excommunicated means that the person can no longer receive the sacraments of the church and is condemned to hell. Hus had to leave his position at the University of Prague and preach to the people around Bohemia, gathering more followers. In 1414, he was ordered to go to the Council of Constance. Remember, this is the one where they were to sort out the problem of the three popes and some of the other pesky business. Well, Jan Hus was the pesky business that the Council of Constance was summoned to sort out. He was asked to come to the council with his safety being promised by the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. However, he was soon imprisoned as a heretic. He was put on trial, found guilty of heresy, and executed by the local town council. After his execution, the Hussites rose up in rebellion against the German rulers of Prague, with some of the German councillors being thrown out the window. And this was known as the first defenestration of Prague. Yes, there is a verb for throwing somebody out of a window, and it is defenestration. And yes, I said first, which means that there is a second and even a third defenestration. The Pope launched 5 crusades or holy wars against the Hussites in a war known as the Hussite Wars, but failed to suppress them. Eventually, a compromise was made with the war ending in 1434. But Jan Hus and John Wycliffe, these were massive influences on the man we will meet in the next video, who would rock the church to its core and cause a split in the church that would last to this day, Martin Luther. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know 2 facts about John Wycliffe and his life and teachings. You guys should also know 2 facts about Jan Hus and his life and teachings. And finally, you guys should know 1 reform proposed by Wycliffe and 1 reform proposed by Hus. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.